Welcome to the Web Platform Podcast, a developer discussion that dives deep into all things web. We discuss everything from developing for mobile to building HTTP software, from wearables and robotics to user experience and mentoring. We bring to our listeners everything related to building products and services for the web platform of today, tomorrow, and beyond. The Web Platform Podcast was created to be a developer podcast that explores development and production of all things connected to the internet. So technology is only a part of creating great products and services. People, processes, product innovations, and emerging web application standards are also huge pieces of what this podcast is going to be about. And that's in the context of development. Last but not least, this is also about sharing ideas and better informing of the development communities. So James Shore, a guest on the show in a future episode, he's also Agile thought leader and author. He once spoke about product and service development and what that means. So his message summarized was that it encompasses all facets of building great software, from QA to product management to UX to engineering, etc. So in that idea, engineering cannot stand alone, but the focus will be on developing and building things here. In 2009, I immersed myself in the Ruby communities. For me, working with Ruby language was a significant experience in my career. So this may seem crazy, but the community made me want to be better at my coding craft. I'd never looked at code quite the same again, and many Rubyists inspired me to be better at my craft and stand up for what is right and what is best for the clients, users, and stakeholders. This was the first time I had felt good about my career and what I was doing. So you see, for me, I came from an art background. I'm an artist at heart. And I decided I wanted to go into coding for many reasons. I just kind of fell into it. My father was an engineer. A lot of people were pushing to have this knowledge base out there. So I was like, wow, I saw the opportunity where money was going to be coming in for these type of things. So that's how it started. So I was using JavaScript way before Ruby, the very basics, and I was always more comfortable with CSS, HTML, and it always seemed much more visible and tangible and easier. So I felt overwhelmed by the code skills of my peers, but taught myself slowly, so I knew what skills I would need, because I knew that I needed to get better and better and better if I was going to be making some good money at this. So it took me forever to understand simple concepts in programming like variables, arrays, and classes. I don't have that comp sci background, so it took a while, but I eventually got it. So this didn't deter me from pursuing it, but it was definitely a hindrance. So what happened next was pretty incredible for me. I expected to learn how to code better, but that wasn't quite what happened. Instead, I learned how to use my strengths and creative skills to be a more valuable part of the product team, the development team, if you will, which, as I said before, includes many different facets. I was doing things I was very negative and skeptical about at first, but the team culture never dismissed my ideas, and it started to be a much more positive engagement for me. So it was all about communication and creative thought, which surprised me. I hadn't had this experience in a lot of places before. I had it outside of work, and of course in my art. But before long, I was pair programming, learning communication techniques that were new to me, learning about new team dynamics, designing code through TDD, which I had never worked with before, and started in JavaScript and Ruby, and teaching and learning from my peers, and for my peers, and a lot more. So the culture of the team was open, and everyone seemed to have a voice. In that fact, we were all recognized for our differences and how each difference brought something new to the table and something that could help build a better product. So quickly, I attended local user groups, mostly with Ruby or JavaScript, and online creative collaborative training. And I found the same ideas and focus on building great products and services, and that idea of quality and self-betterment. It was really a great experience on a personal level as well as on a code level. So perhaps this was Agile at its core and not so much Ruby, but it was Ruby that I had first experienced this with. So that's why I felt attending a regional conference that was small with some really talented speakers, it was a great way to showcase what the Ruby community is doing for the web platform. So building software is ultimately more about consistency, people, and processes than it is about knowing languages or syntaxes. So RubyNation is probably one of the best regional conferences you could attend in this respect. The reasons are many, but at its core, it is about moving the web platform. It's about sharing of knowledge. As developers, we can provide better quality digital experiences in that right. So at the conference venue in Silver Springs, Maryland, the United States, I interviewed several speakers, but in the end, I was only able to use a small percentage of my recordings, unfortunately. But most of the discussions focused on people, processes, and quality. So these are the core ideas to building products agnostic to any single language or technology stack or anything like that. It's not the sugary syntax or ease of use or performance that draws me to Ruby. It's the integrity, the open sharing, and the desire to be better. And that's what I really love about the Rubyists and the Ruby community. So now let's hear more. Let's hear some of the speakers at RubyNation and some of the conversations that we had. And we'll go through that now.
Kenneth writes, I work for Heroku. I am the Python overlord there, and I'm here gathering secret intel on the Ruby community.
Is that your official title?
It is my official title.
That's incredible.
It's on my business card.
Nice.
Yes.
Overlord, I gotta get one of those.
And I'm Davey Stevenson. I work at Esri at their Portland R&D Center, and our focus is trying to make it easier for developers and people without a GIS background to be able to put GIS data on the web, easily accessible in a beautiful format.
My name is Sam Phippen. I'm speaking at the conference about the internal architecture of RSpec mocks. I work for a company called Fun and Plausible Solutions. We do sort of consulting on hard computer science problems, and to try and one-up the job title, mine is the Director of Plausibility, which I like. Yeah, I'm sort of here today just to speak at the conference, have a good time.
Cool. I'm Terrence Lee. I also work for Heroku. I run the Ruby Task Force. We call ourselves Ruby Task Force members. I just finished my talk about contributing back to Ruby core at RubyNation.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. A lot of open source people today, have contributed back to the core language or the core key userland type of stuff. Yeah. So why have you guys come to RubyNation in particular? Sam, you're coming all the way from.
Yeah, so mostly I came because I was told it was a really nice conference to attend. I got accepted to speak, which is always good. And, it's nice to meet other Ruby developers who maybe have a different perspective to me, because a lot of the developers I speak with in London, sort of, we've all sort of converged on our own ideas, and this is just a different community, and that's really useful feedback together for the open source I work on. So I help maintain RSpec as part of my contribution to open source.
Have you noticed any changes with RSpec 3 now?
I've noticed quite nearly all of the changes.
Because you're speaking about testing, right?
Yeah, because I actually helped implement a number of the changes through RSpec 3. The talk I'm giving today, most of what it's about actually would have been the same if RSpec 3 hadn't been released. The architecture didn't change that much. So my talk focuses on, it's a sort of vertical slice through RSpec's mocking library on how the actual architecture of that works, because it's fairly complex, and I thought it was quite interesting for people to learn about.
Yeah. For those who are listening and not familiar with RSpec, it is a testing library for Ruby, typically added into Rails as well. So it provides a lot of good features. As far as I remember migrating from version 1 to 2 was like hell.
Yeah.
How is it now with this version?
So the party line is that moving from RSpec 2 to RSpec 3 should be the easiest major upgrade you've ever done. We've released a transitional version of the gem, RSpec 299, which will give you warnings for anything that won't upgrade smoothly, and then you can move on to RSpec 3 once you're warning free. We've also, a member of the community, I think it's Yuji Nakayama or Nakajima, has created a gem called Transpec, which will actually automatically translate all of your RSpec tests from RSpec 2 to RSpec 3, and it will just work straight away. And it's an amazingly solid tool, and it's made the transition easier for so many people.
Auto magic awesomeness.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. And it works?
It totally works. It like completely works. It's amazing.
I feel like after the Ruby migration tools of like 1.8 to 1.9, I'm always suspect of like any auto magic migration tools.
I mean, try it out for yourself, right? You know, we have revision control systems to save us when these sorts of things go wrong, but as far as I've seen, Transpec just totally works, and no one's really had any problems with it.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing where I don't think you just commit. You just don't run the script and just commit away. Still look at it. Hopefully.
Yeah.
You run the tests before you commit, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Just ship it.
Yeah. But no,
If the test pass,
The
it's
script
definitely
just
good
works.
code, right?
Yeah.
Travis said no, but you know, this guy said the gem
Any
works,
failing
so
test
it's
just
fine.
deletes automatically.
Yeah.
So do you find that this is in any like similar fashion to Python?
What, with the RSpec stuff?
Well, yeah, testing in general. Like, is it?
So in the Python community, we have a much different approach to things like that. We definitely aren't nearly as fanatical about testing. The analog for us for testing is documentation.
Yeah.
So we're very, very adamant about documentation.
So a different mindset for that then.
Absolutely, yeah. And the tooling, we were just having a discussion about this a few minutes ago. The tooling is not nearly as well. You can speak to it. Is a lot different, right?
Yeah. So I actually spend about 20% of my time writing Python tooling. So I have something of a lens into the differences between writing Ruby and Python. And one of the things that I found quite interesting is the testing tools in Python are completely different and definitely don't feel as mature, although that said, you know, I have lots of bias.
Yeah, so when I
I'm
use
willing
them,
to admit to all of
I
that.
feel like they're completely sufficient, but it's because I'm not like into testing. I just I write integration tests and every once in a while unit tests. But you guys
Do people do
like,
TDD in Python?
Yeah, but not everyone. And it's not, you know, it's like a tool that you can use.
Yeah.
Right.
But you know, Ruby's.
Well, DJ
whole
just said
culture.
TDD is
Yeah,
dead.
TDD is dead. So
over.
actually, RSpec 3.1 is just going to be an empty gem. It's not going to have any content. You know, we don't need to write tests anymore.
RSpec Vapor Edition.
Indeed, yeah.
Nice.
So my talk today at RubyNation was on how Ruby and programming in general, but Ruby specifically, can be treated as a science, an art, and a craft. And I think that the Ruby language in particular highlights a lot of the three different aspects of it very strongly. And talked about the importance of learning about algorithms and trying to explore different algorithms for solving the same problem, and what you can learn from that as the science aspect. And the art aspects, not only the practice part, the thing about artists is they're always practicing, and they're always, it's not only like the grand big projects either. That's, I think, one of the things that lots of people get stuck up on. They need to be writing these grand programming projects.
The monolith.
The monolith, the gigantic, the tour de force, right? But it's also about the small things, the practice, the sketchbook, drawing the same faces over and over again to practice and get better. And so writing the same code over and over again to practice and get better, trying it slightly different ways, is, that's part of the art of programming.
And the definition of insanity as well.
Yes, and the definition of insanity. And then also, I think particularly learning how to critique yourself, your own code, and critiquing others' codes in a way that's constructive.
Yeah.
Is an important aspect, because we are in this together. We are a team.
Yeah.
No one's writing code by themselves. Even if you try, it's almost it's impossible. You cannot write code by yourself without code that other people wrote for operating systems, libraries, tools, anything. So we're part of this community, and that's one of the great things about the Ruby community is that we are so friendly and opening.
Yeah.
And so just focusing on that as part of what makes us and Ruby great. And then the craft aspect of it as well is realizing that it is something that takes practice.
Yeah.
That it takes time. You're not going to be awesome at it instantly, and that there's lots of different things to learn. So even if you are a master craftsman in one thing, there's still all these other areas where you're going to be like, I have no idea how to do this. So I'm a knitter, so I talked a lot about how I think knitting parallels programming. And even afterwards, like, someone came up to me and talked about how his wife had just gotten these giant looms, and did I know anything about looms? And I was like, no. I mean, abstractly, I know some things about looms, and I think that it can still be very analogous, but even though I'm really good at this one craft doesn't mean that I'm necessarily as good at that other thing, but it doesn't mean that I'm not interested in it. Yeah. It doesn't mean that I can't dabble in it.
You find that the craft is the hardest thing for people to grasp when they start doing web development in general, because like the Ruby community has been very good about doing blog posts and putting stuff out there for people to find. Mm-hmm. And some other communities have done this as well. But I think it's intimidating. Maybe I'm wrong. You guys let me know. But it's intimidating for somebody who comes in and sees all of this stuff and says, I have to be like making the next big app, but where do I begin?
Or even I can't even publish a blog post unless I know 100% that it's right, and that's I think that's harmful thinking, because even if you're exploring something and maybe there is a more optimal solution that you haven't found yet, it's still really valuable to be publishing that stuff out there and creating those discussions. Mm-hmm. And what you've done could still help other people, and by putting something out there, you're afraid of the criticism, the harsh criticism, right? But if we can continue forming this community that has constructive criticism and is working on helping everyone learn and improve, then that can maybe make it easier for someone to say, like, hey, I've been fiddling with this thing. This is some, a problem I had and a solution I've gotten to, and then other people are like, that's great. I really like how you did it there. Have you seen this other work that might be like a little bit more efficient, or this other, thing that you haven't discovered yet? And that's the sort of community that I want to build.
It's interesting you say that too, because I work. I used to be on R&D team, but now I'm on a UX team. Mm-hmm. So I do a lot of rapid prototyping. I get to choose whatever technologies I want to choose. And working with UX professionals, it's interesting because they talk about when you speak with users and you talk with people, you always want to say, yes and. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be negative about it. Mm-hmm. So there's this openness, and I feel like the Ruby community definitely embraces that. Mm-hmm. So that's, would you guys agree?
Yeah, I like in the, like, having done a bunch of Rails stuff, I think that's like in the spirit of, like, the Ruby community is probably one of the key communities that made that so successful. Like, I don't know in other communities how successful it would have been necessarily. Having not, like, being active members in other communities as well, but, like, just, like, the whole Mats is nice, so we are nice kind of, like, mantra that gets said a lot. I think, like, on the flip side, like, we were talking yesterday about how, like, there's some arguments sometimes, like, on just, like, issue trackers on the Ruby list, but, like, Mats's responses are always very composed and, like, polite, and even if he doesn't agree with whatever that person's saying, he'll, like, write it in an eloquent enough way where he's not, like, it's not like he's trying to attack the person, he's trying to make his point, and explain, like, kind of the belief that the core team has on something. And if you, like, look at it on the other side, like, I think the Linux mailing lists and other things are, like, known to be much more aggressive. Where, like, like, Linus will totally flame you for something, and it's very refreshing to that, like, the kind of, like, leader of the community that a lot of us, like, have Mats, like, in our heads as has that kind of stance and, like, that kind of attitude. And I also think, like, things like Rails Girls are super successful because even though a lot of those people will never, like, don't continue programming, there definitely are some that do. I think it creates an environment where you can say, like, there are no stupid questions, and people feel comfortable asking that, and I think that's very indicative of lots of places outside of Rails girls in the Ruby community.
It's very, very old culture. I think we're moving away from that in business where it's like CYA, I can't look bad, I can't fail, and now we're sort of overly embracing failure to some degree, but it's interesting to see, and there's a lot, like with the blog posts in the community. I don't know how you guys feel, but sometimes you'll have, there's a lot of really good posts about certain things, and then you'll go through a period in that community's life cycle where there's a lot of hate stuff, Hacker News mostly.
Yeah. Well,
and then it'll go back around.
Don't read the comments.
Yes, it pulls you in.
Yeah, actually, a buddy of mine, Tom Stewart, did a talk in response to some of the things DHH said at RailsConf this year, sort of focusing on how it's more important to understand what the world looks like to you than
I loved that talk.
Necessarily, thank you, following what some of the community leaders say, right? And he got flamed so hard on Hacker News, like, no, DHH is our leader, he's amazing, we love everything that he's...
He's a very opinionated guy who came up with Rails, right?
He built a nice framework, but
the whole point was that it was like the whole world is built, the whole open source world is all built on having, we all have direct experience, and we all have to build up and share our direct experience, and not be afraid of that, and that's what it's all about. And we have to build. Ideally, we need to have an environment where people aren't afraid to share that, so we can. That's how, he ended it on like so. So we can all know how the world looks like to you.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, totally.
And that's how we all learn from each other. If you can't share, and if we can't interact in that way in a non-toxic environment, then all it's just going to slow down progress. That's what open source is all about.
I think it's very interesting because I felt like DHH got flamed a lot after his talk, so it's interesting to hear
he shouldn't have, though.
The reverse of that.
He was trying to say the opposite of that.
So
he was saying that he was saying some negative things about DHH, but he was actually saying that his perspective is valuable to us. We should listen to it and then disregard it.
It was more the point that Tom was trying to get across. I sort of had a conversation with him afterwards. It was more that the celebrity culture that sort of the Ruby community has, a mono celebrity culture isn't great for fostering, collaborative thinking about ideas. If everyone just blindly follows anyone in particular, it's worse than if everyone shares all of their ideas.
To everybody, not just one person.
And this is why I actually thought it was really great that people like Gary Bernhardt and Kent Beck came out and wrote sort of blog posts about why the things DHH was saying were maybe incorrect in some context for other people, right? It's really important to think about these things before just going, listen to the loudest, shoutiest guy in the room, which I think it's fair to say DHH will probably win that crown in this community nearly all of the time.
As far as the web in general, for you, I mean, you at Heroku, the both of you have worked with several different languages, right? So, I mean, that's one of the things I'm finding is that sometimes in for Java as an example, right? I'm not familiar with the community or whatever, but it's been around a while and people are excited to do the Java work. But if we have lots of developers who know Java and a few who know Ruby, which we do at our place, how do you scale that? How do you build up that knowledge base within because there's very two different ways of thinking within those communities. It's an easy question, I know.
Talking about within the context of the open source world?
Even client work, just in general.
How do you bridge gaps between two different knowledge bases, between two different...
I work with Node, for instance, right, a lot. And, I find a lot of places they're either a Node place, where that's what they do, they build with Node, or, they have one guy that can do it, or one lady, who could do it, and that person is the person who's going to do those projects, and there's no focus then to drive sales and to drive, building products with those. So you need to actually take it from art to a craft at that point.
Sure. So I think one of the best ways to sort of cross-train different things is to pair with people who are really good at that particular thing, right? So
pair programming. Right?
Yeah, completely. So I tend to be more back-end focused than front-end focused, just sort of naturally where I've ended up.
Yeah.
But I always find pairing with really good front-end developers really interesting, because you learn much more of their sort of perspective, as well as some of the techniques that they're using that you maybe would never have thought of on your own, right? That you don't really need to do in Ruby land or Java land or whatever, because JavaScript is so different to the sort of more profoundly object-oriented programming languages, and I think it's a really good way to sort of cross-train developers on new skills.
And I think it's also kind of important in those areas to realize that pair programming oftentimes isn't trying to get the two people to be identical in skills, right?
Yeah.
It's to share knowledge and to expose other people to what the other person is doing, so that they have a context for asking questions and asking the right questions later on.
Yeah.
And kind of understanding like the flow and like where things start and end, so that they can integrate things more easily. My office also is pretty cross-disciplinary. We have, in addition to the Ruby programmers, we do some stuff in Node and have a bunch of front-end people that do amazing work in JavaScript and a lot in Angular. And we also have mobile, iOS, and Android engineers. And so we also, we don't silo them. Like I think that's a dangerous thing to have, like the one Android person and the one Node guy over in the corner. It's
a start, but you need to nurture that and build it.
To make it a priority to have people cross-pollinate, and it doesn't mean that everyone has to be an expert in everything, but that they have to have some idea about why was this language chosen for certain things? What is its strengths? What is its weaknesses? What does this project do?
It was really amazing to me how these events, it's not just somebody does an event and it's done. Like I said, when I walked in, Gray Herder, the main lead on the organization for this, he and his family were there. Like his family's coming out with boxes and bringing stuff in, and it was a whole like community event. It was really well done, and I was very impressed at the passion that everyone had for this type of event. So it goes a long way to really, you get passionate speakers, you get passionate people who run it, very talented people, the local companies involved, and it really spoke to the quality of this type of project. There's a lot of thinking of how are we going to build great things for the users and for the stakeholders and the business of these things. How do we build good things, with purpose, not just, let's just build it because it's cool and we have some great technology. This discussion really reminded me of those points. Dan Mayer talked about refactoring. And as you heard, I think his talk he removed thousands and thousands of lines of code. So lots of lines of code does not equal great experience or great product. We're building things for people. We have to really be concerned with doing it right and building it for the future, not just for now, but for tomorrow.
I'm one of the organizers of RubyNation, and I'm also doing the closing keynote here at RubyNation. And in larger life, I split my time between Ruby and Clojure at Cognitech.
Hi, I'm Dan Mayer, and I'm doing a talk on production code analysis, focusing mostly on finding unused code by seeing what's actually going on in your system on production.
Hey, I'm John Paul Ashenfelter. I am here talking about data science at RubyNation, and in my day job, I do data science on the marketing team at Treehouse.
So I think it's probably a sign that we really like this venue. We like the idea of having much of the conference single track. Yeah. And it's just difficult to manage a sort of 50% single track conference and find the room space that's configurable enough. So I'm not sure we would necessarily grow it. I think we could, but at least the last time I talked to the rest of the organizers, we were kind of comfortable at 250 or 300 people. Yeah. It just seems like a good size.
It seems like there's a lot of people coming,
from different backgrounds, not just Ruby.
Right.
So it's interesting for the whole web platform, right?
Yeah, I think that one of the great things about the Ruby community is we started as a bunch of people who came from other places, and we've never ever quite lost that feeling that maybe I'll try something different next week, and if that works better, I'll tell all my friends. And it's less a community committed to a single technology and more a community committed to, I don't know, doing great things, doing cool things.
Do you think that the local business is getting involved in everything? You think that, what do you think of that as far as?
Well, I don't think we could do it without our sponsors, none of whom I can bring to mind right at the moment, but we appreciate every single one of them.
Definitely. I actually interviewed with
Living Social, yes, among others.
Yeah, I work there, so I'll have to say yes. We like to sponsor, and actually on the national versus regional, because you were talking about the national conferences. I personally really like regional conferences because I feel like since they're smaller, you actually get a little more time to talk with the community that's there at the conference. Yeah. When a conference is so big, you kind of get lost in the crowd, and a lot of people form little groups because they know already people in the community. So you almost end up sharing less and meeting less people. When it's the small regional conferences, I really like kind of the community that forms in the small group together.
Yeah, it's more approachable. I haven't been to a lot of the Ruby meetups as of late, but I remember going and I met some really talented people. We spoke about this earlier, Dan and John, where people that I met at these meetups, they'll show up at these events, and it's kind of nice. You haven't seen people in 6 months, 12 months, catch up and everything. I don't know. I haven't been to too many of the national conventions. I'm not sure if that's the case with those as well, but I'm sure as you get bigger in the industry, that's probably the case, right?
Yeah, I think it is.
Well, and I'll say for RubyNation, there aren't a lot of East Coast tech conferences without a full government focus or a very businessy focus. There's, of course, Gotham City Ruby, and now there's Wicked up in Boston, both fairly far from the Mid-Atlantic. But, it's surprising that as you go south of New York, there are very few options. I'm always surprised there's not one in North Carolina. The Closure certainly has had its conference down there, as has RubyConf been in Charlotte years and years ago. But, there's this giant gulf between, Philadelphia, let's say, and Florida for the Ruby tech community and the JavaScript tech community, all the tech communities for the most part, for conferences that are regional. And it's great that this one has managed to be around for 7 years.
I think this is the 8th year.
8th year.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll say, just as far as the venue goes, so much better than Ruston. So much better than the Ruston.
It would have been nice to drive from
Marriott or the Marriott or the Hyatt or wherever they were.
Florida now has Atlas RubyConf. It's the 2nd year, right? But it's a very new regional conference.
There's also
Ancient City.
Oh, that might have actually been. That's what I was thinking.
You're right. That one is down there.
But it's all the way. I mean, God knows I love to go to Florida, but it's all the way down to Florida.
Yeah, I mean, it's equidistant to Boston.
New York's a little more approachable, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's. It's funny you mentioned how long we've been around, and the fact that we're kind of the only one. RubyNation got started when me and Dave Bach and certainly Gray and a few other people, Zandy Johnson, got together. We were all working in the same company, and we got together and we said, "Hey, there is no conference here. We should do a 50-person conference, in the conference room of our company, and have a Ruby conference." And that's kind of how it started. And even the first one, when we finally got the first one off the ground, it was more like 200 people. It sort of grew out from underneath our original ideas. So.
And you've been working in technology a long time, through many different aspects of it. You've written 2 books on Ruby, maybe 3.
2.
Okay. Wasn't sure if there was a new one coming. But I see them, on people's desks all the time. And is there, I know you do Closure as well. Mm-hmm. I think one of the big strong points of the Ruby community is that it's not just about building stuff with Ruby or Rails, or it's more about let's solve problems. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that it's funny. You can, Closure is earlier in its life cycle than Ruby. It's a newer language, and you can kind of tell where the Clojure, here's a person at a Clojure conference, you can kind of tell where they've come from by what they complain about. I think that's probably true of,
I think that's true
of all of these things. So the Java people complain about build tools, but the Ruby people who come to Clojure complain about like ease of use and just sort of taking some of the complexity out of it. And I think that is something Ruby people can take back into the larger world. I think you see that maybe with Rails. There's lots of people who would never use Rails who are using web frameworks that were clearly influenced by Rails. I don't know if it's still true, but a few years ago, the best thing you could say about a web framework was it's Rails-like. This is Rails in Java. This is Rails in Scala. And I think the Ruby community has figured out something important about how to do technology that I think could use. We could rub off on the other communities. It's probably true of the JavaScript world.
Yeah, I think the JavaScript world has figured out how to deal with a lot of the complexity. There's a lot of frameworks launching all the time. There's build tools launching all the time. I think there's a lot more experimentation, honestly, right now in the JavaScript world. Maybe because there's probably an order of magnitude more people who at least know JavaScript to some degree. And there's no clear center of the river like there is with Rails. I mean, in Ruby, you can do RSpec, and maybe you're using test unit, and maybe someone else tries some other test framework for a little while, but not very long. There's a new build tool every week for JavaScript, and because people are trying to solve problems in different ways, and
younger community,
and it's young, right? Yeah, and they're willing to try things, and that's fascinating to see. And a lot of times, the winners or the ones that do better are the ones that are focused on ease of use. Yeoman is a great example of that. Yeoman, I don't know Grunt very well, but using Yeoman to generate Grunt files taught me a lot about Grunt because it made the generation very easy, and that was a huge plus, even if I'm not going to use Yeoman. Thanks.
Yeah, and the community too, in JavaScript in particular, is very divided on the thoughts of what should be in the language, because there's different use cases on the server versus on the browser.
Yep.
And even now you have to worry about hardware. Tesla.io is at JSConf,
yep.
And they have a built-in runtime on their boards
yep.
for JavaScript. So it's interesting stuff. I'd like to see that for Ruby or Python too, like built in.
Yeah, well, and what Russ was saying about ease of use. So with the data science I've been using things like R and Octave, which is like MATLAB. And the word I use most commonly to describe them to other people is hostile. Because, they are very, very good at what they're doing.
Yeah.
But they are not even remotely easy to use. There's coming, especially after a long time in Ruby, coming and just trying to deal with the editing environment such that they are, and the feedback and debugging. It's just it's hard to believe that that's how software used to get done, and that just makes me run screaming back to Ruby. But then Ruby's nowhere near as performant as these tools are, so you end up realizing that there's a reason that people still use these tools, but bringing some of that usability back would really be nice in a lot of these
considering
languages.
I totally get what you're saying. Considering emerging technologies, how do you guys feel Ruby fits into the future of building for the web?
Might actually be a little behind on some of that. There's, like you said, more experimentation in some of the other languages, but a lot of times we seem to refine it well and export it out. Like you said, other company or other frameworks are Rails-like. We've also exported basically rack.
Yep.
Like every framework now has a rack. I think testing in general, like Ruby, everywhere kind of tries to get a testing setup that's as easy to use as Ruby's. There's something else that kind of the Ruby community's kind of led the charge and helped standardize what's a clean, nice way to do it. So I think other places might find things that emerge, and then we'll copy them as well, but perhaps we will find a clean way to help standardize it across the community, because we do tend to find one or two really good ways to do things and get the community behind those efforts.
I will say that I think the bigger picture is that I think we are in one of those periods where there's just been a renaissance of odd programming languages. It seems like once a week there's a programming language that really has some weight behind it. I mean, this week it was Swift. You know, a few years ago it was Go. And these are not, you know, toy programming languages. These are real serious things with, you know, real serious people behind them and very smart people. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that JavaScript was kind of a joke, and now it's a very, very serious thing. So I think, and Ruby was kind of in the same boat, I think we are at the point where people are willing to look around and say, hey, I'll try Clojure. You know, I grew up in the, you know, early part of my career. There were basically two programming languages that you could use, and those were the two programming languages people had been using for 20 years. And everybody knew they weren't great programming languages, but those were the ones you used. And that's just not true anymore. People are willing to kind of look around and do something different.
Do you think more programmers will become polyglot because of that? Because as we do like more small services and whatnot, you'll say like, well, we're going to use Go over here because it makes sense, Clojure over here, whatever.
Yeah, well, I think that's already happened. I mean, I think again, if you look back, I don't know, 25 years ago, it was basically, there was a very, very small number of programming languages that anybody used with any frequency, and now the average programmer is using 3 or 4 in a web application, right? JavaScript and Clojure or whatever they got on the back end, and you know, probably half a dozen others to deploy and that kind of stuff.
How often do you think a lot of these things that are repeated over and over get rolled into the main frameworks, or even into Ruby itself?
What do you mean?
So in JavaScript, sometimes what'll happen, like promises is a good example, right? That was something that, you know, some people in userland came up with, right? And then now it's rolled back into a real standard that's now being put in.
It's interesting because wasn't Terrence, his talk, he was talking about kind of the Ruby standard lib, and they say less often now they're trying to bring things in Ruby standard lib because they like letting kind of the userland gem world do a lot of that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you'll see it rolled back into like Ruby itself unless it's something that needs to work at that level. Like if you're talking about the C-level things like coverage and some of the new feature work like Aman Gupta's been working on, that'll end up there. But I think gems, and you'll see frameworks that kind of win, so people can always explore them elsewhere, but that's where you'll see them rolled into.
Yeah, like Angular 2, what they've done, like they break out pieces. It used to be this one giant architecture, and so now they're taking their router out because they know that there's this other project that's being used. So it's interesting to see some of this stuff happening.
Yeah, I think that's the batteries included problem of, if you like the batteries included, you just use it and it works. Except every now and then you get it and the batteries are dead. And you know, Ruby shipped for a long time with broken pieces in the standard library, and they were hard to change because they were in there. And I think that was kind of the original motive was batteries included, and now maybe they're coming to the, it's better to have fresh batteries, right?
Yeah. I can definitely agree for the core language itself, right? Yeah. And one of the things about the Ruby community that strikes me as really powerful is that desire to share knowledge, that desire to mentor people and give them the tools that they need to be successful, but also to learn from them. So pair programming as an example, where two programmers are working together on the same thing at the same time. We talked about that and how that it really influences how you design and how you build good code. So the idea of mentorship was really big.
Start.
I'm Sean Schofield, creator of Spree, the open source Ruby e-commerce platform, and the CEO of Spree Commerce. I'm here. I'm a long time. I've been at I was at the first RubyNation, 6 some odd years ago. So I'm here because I like small regional conferences. Those are like the best kind of like level of. I like 1 or 2 track conferences. So just get to meet everybody and network and.
And you all get to see the same.
Yeah, it's the same people. It's the same people year after year, and especially when the early days when there were very few people doing Ruby, it was like a way to kind of meet other people who are doing what you do. Now it's a little more mainstream, but
not feel like the outcast in the corner.
Yeah, it never let that bother me, but yeah, there wasn't a lot of people doing Ruby back at the first RubyNation. So yeah, I'm a big fan of, and just you work online with certain people. So in general, I'm a big fan of conferences and seeing people you work with online.
So did you speak today, or are you speaking tomorrow?
I spoke today.
Today. I apologize for missing that.
It was a riveting talk.
So what did you talk about?
You'll hear about it soon, I'm sure.
Just at a high level.
It was called A Game of Startups, and so I decided to do a non-technical talk, and just I have a kind of unique perspective, especially here. There aren't a lot of venture-backed companies in the DC area, although there are a few. And so kind of just talked about how the game is sort of played, what defines winning, how companies win, what VCs are looking for, and like how employees make out under certain scenarios, like what, who gets paid and when, and kind of things to think about if you're working for a venture-backed startup.
Yeah, sounds pretty intricate and complex.
Yeah, it's good. It's good for 30 minutes, right? It's a 30-minute talk. It's about as much as people can take, but everybody's really interested for 30 minutes, so it worked.
Was there a good amount of questioning at the end?
Yeah, I had a lot of questions and more follow-up questions.
Awesome. So, Carl, you want to...
Yeah, I'm Carl Durante. I'm a technical lead at Custom Ink, and I work on one of the e-commerce teams. And we build applications and components that are necessary for the business on the front end of the business. What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
So why RubyNation? Why are you speaking here at RubyNation? And what are you speaking about?
I love RubyNation because it is a local conference. In this area, it's a large metro area, Maryland, Virginia, DC. We have a lot of user groups, DC Rug, Arlington Rug, Nova Rug, Ruby Logo. There's a lot of JS groups that are popping up. There's DevOps, there's database groups. There are lots of members that float in between all of these groups, but we don't have an opportunity to all get together. And so I really look forward to coming here because I get to see everybody in the same place. I've been impressed over the years that it's had a bigger draw. So I think this year somebody was just sitting in front of me from London. I met a speaker from Brazil, I guess who's in Scotland right now. A lot of folks from Boston this year, which I think is really cool, but people just from all over, which is really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. This is my first RubyNation here, but what I've noticed is the community. Like when I first moved here, I moved from New Jersey, New York area, and thinking that was the center of all technology, other than San Francisco maybe. Yeah. But I was really happily surprised that there's so many talented people in this area, and to have a regional conference to really highlight that is pretty awesome, I think.
Oh, totally. And to Sean's point, I mean, there are not a lot of venture-backed companies here, and that's because the government is so prevalent. So there's the government itself, and then there's all the offshoots of that, so the defense contracting and all the work that's around there. So most of the people you meet tend to be doing some hush-hush secret work, which isn't like on the West Coast where they're in stealth mode. Like they're really under, they have clearances and things like that. And I've been fortunate enough to work in a couple of the venture-backed initiatives here. They haven't gone anywhere. I'm really happy to see Sean's initiative take off, and it's just exciting to be a part of that sort of that vibrant side of the culture that's happening in DC. Not that there's anything wrong with the government side, but having come,
it's just a different way of working for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. The government moves very slowly. It's the opposite of a startup,
right?
I mean, it's very steady, but they work on unique problems that only the government can work on.
Yeah.
Like how to read everybody's email or whatever. But you can't do that anywhere else.
That'll be open source soon.
But so they're unique challenges that only the government offers.
Yeah.
But for people who are a little more risk averse or they have families and things, it's expensive to live here. So
totally.
I totally get why some people do it. But it's very different. It's the opposite of...
It's been interesting over the years to see how that's changed just a little bit. I mean, I think by and large that's a true statement, but I meet people that are doing these interesting little pieces for the CIA or for Department of Defense where they have these massive data sets and they just their cycles take too long and they know it and they don't know what to do with it, and so they'll pull in a Ruby guy here or there and they'll put together some kind of Mongo back database so they can quickly grab data or run some MapReduce algorithms on it to find the things they want or look for the patterns that they want, and they've also brought in some folks to try to bring some communication between these departments and to build some of the bridges so that they can talk to each other. But it's still far and few between. It's not what you hope it would become.
And Chris, you're speaking with Carl today. What are you guys going to be talking about?
Yeah, so my name is Chris Marr. I'm at Custom Ink with Carl. So a few months ago, we started this Skunkworks project to build some dashboards to display on our TVs at work. And we did this just on our own time, kind of like a 10% time thing. And we found it really easy to get some data up quickly. And before we knew it, it just started taking off. It became really contagious around the company. And it became an important project. And we found it just so easy, we thought, hey, we can tell other people how easy it is. And kind of how we started is you don't have to have official approval to kind of get started on something, and just throwing up a couple pieces of data, a couple data points, like your daily sales or something, it just became contagious. And we'd hope other people can do that. So we thought we'd come here and let people know that it's not that difficult to get something going. And our talk is about how we built the dashboards, but also how we kind of maneuvered in the company, like how we kind of first put it up. We just stood up in our office in like an old monitor, and people just started coming by and just being captivated. It was like a campfire. Yeah. All of a sudden, people were just gathering around this old monitor that we were just showing a couple data points on. And then it just grew. They're like, oh, can you add this data point? Can you add this? And it just took off and became its own project. No one even realizes that it wasn't no one requested it. It just appeared one day, and then it just became a very important part of our company.
Sounds like you can make that into a process at Custom Ink.
Yeah, I think so. It's I think our story is, I don't know. It's a very interesting story how we got started, and I think other people maybe feel constrained in their company, like they know that the company can use a dashboard, but they're not getting official time to spend on it. But we didn't have that, and we were able to make it something that management loves now. We get recognition for, and I think other people will enjoy hearing the story.
I know you and Carl both help organize a meetup called Ruby Loco in Loudoun County there. Do you feel like Hack Night, especially for that, has really contributed to a lot of these ideas that you guys have?
I think it's funny, we actually end up bringing the ideas of things we've hacked on to the Hack Night, because we go, oh my gosh, Hack Night's tomorrow, what are we going to do? Yeah. So we actually used, I guess Chris signed us up for a DC rug. They were looking for speakers, and I came into work one morning, and Chris said, hey, we're going to talk about this next week, and I said, okay, and we put something together, and we thought there was some meat to the subject, and we were able to formulate it into more of a formal talk. And once we had done that, we started taking it to some of the user groups just to try it out and make sure that it was going to be well received. Because I think on the surface, the content seems like very beginner or very high level and almost not appropriate for a Ruby conference. But at its core, what we're talking about is Ruby and the projects that we work on, and how it can actually change your project and change how your team views its work. And so we took this to our user group to just show people. But so far, it's been really well received. We show it to folks, and they immediately start trying to create dashboards. And within a day or two, they hit us up again saying, hey, thanks so much. I created this dashboard. It's really helping me out, which has been exciting, I think, for us.
Do you guys find, and I guess this is for everybody, do you find that when you do things like that, and people start to get interested, that you're involving other groups within the company, like user experience or product, or whichever other teams that are not necessarily development? Because a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but many companies will have the development team. They have their own life cycle. It's siloed, and you have design, who they have their own stuff, and then they give it off to the team. Have you found that a lot of this has helped with collaboration, like at your positions?
Well, we have a hack. So at Spree Commerce, we actually we call it Crazy Idea Day. Yeah. It was like a hackathon, basically.
Is that once a month? I'm sorry. Or?
No, probably maybe once quarterly. Because our team is also distributed, so our team will be here for an entire week. So we'll fly in all the international people. So we have a bunch of people who work here, but then we have a bunch of international people too. So we'll fly everybody in for a week. At the end of the week, we usually, like Thursday night, we'll set up the problem, and then Friday we'll hack all day, and then at the end of the day, present. Yeah. And we've only done a couple, but almost all, I think 3 out of the 4 projects became like features, within 6 months that we had hacked on. So, and then we present in front of the whole company. So we do involve the marketing and salespeople, because it's really a sneak preview of what's coming, and also to get kind of lay perspective on things.
Yeah, I'm sure you have a great idea of the people in the company. Have you figured out a way to repeat this, like if other people come in or people leave? Like, it's because it sounds like you do, right? Because you're doing it at a regular interval. So have you found that this is something repeatable and it works better each time?
Yeah, I mean, it's repeatable. I've been to conference hackathons, and I find those to be less productive because people are just visiting, and we do ours at the end of the week because, like, we get all the visiting out of our system, like, on the first day. The first day is, like, half visiting and half coding, and then everybody works kind of hard, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday, everybody's all caught up, and they're kind of ready to work. So it works well in a work context, and what we also do is at the management level, we kind of pick the general problems. So we provide a little bit of structure around it, which also helps. So in our case, we have 4 projects, let's say, and we're like, okay, here are 4 topics. Like, all right, we're having a problem with Mongo and it's not scaling very well, and we don't have a lot of Mongo expertise. Let's think of another object store, and we're on AWS for a lot of stuff. So maybe we'll look at DynamoDB. So the topic would be DynamoDB or something else. And then, we had a stats thing. We need to do stats. We really need to know...
Master Chef or something.
Yeah, and, we need to know how much... and we were using graphite and things, but we need, something really robust that's going to handle millions of data points, and, how are we going to chart that, whatever. And then here are a couple services you can look at, but whatever. The mandate is stats. And then, give them, And then we would outline it like that. It's 5 minutes explaining the problem, a couple suggestions on things they might want to explore, or some constraints like, hey, if you could be on Amazon Web Service, that would be much better than some React thing somewhere else because everything else is AWS. But but if it's not good, then pick something else. But here's the business reason behind why we're trying to steer you in a certain direction, and then they would get to pick which teams they want to be on. So who wants to work on this? So they kind of. So there's some self-selection into the thing that they're interested in.
Yeah. It sounds like a great idea.
That works for us.
Yeah. Yeah, we try a variety of different things, and you were talking before about, did a project like the dashboard project get other folks involved, and I think it did naturally just because we're excited about what we did, and we just show it to people, and everybody's curious, and they start asking questions about, oh, that looks really nice, how'd you do that? And we say, haha, it was a dashing gem. We didn't do anything. But let me get your advice while I'm here, because I need to make these colors jive with the company colors, and what could we do, and how could we arrange this? We've tried some hack and learn lunches too, where we just throw out maybe a random topic and say we want to learn more about Angular. We don't know anything about Angular. Just show up, maybe read this tutorial, and let's just start hacking on things. And I think in those settings, it's tough if the biggest problem is that everyone doesn't feel comfortable, right? If you're in a room of 15 of your peers, everyone's, you feel like maybe people are judging you, or some people are more senior than you are, and you're afraid to put your ideas out there. And so I find if you can just get people started with, well, let's all just admit we don't know about this, let's work on this little piece here, and then we start from the same place, and then these groups will naturally form. And I've seen a couple of instances where 2 or 3 people have gotten together and started maybe re-implementing parts of our site with some other technology just to explore it, and then they've taken over these hack lunches to show, hey, here's what we did, and here's how we extended these pieces, here's the decisions we made, here's what we're not sure about, and it's been kind of interesting to start something and watch other people take that and move it forward.
Yeah.
And I think we see that in the hack nights too. People will show up and try things, and
I think it's important to embrace failure as well, quote unquote failure. So people are very, by and large, I think, developers and people in general tend to be insecure and worried about how other people, and it's really easy to be intimidated in the programming space because people are just brilliant. And you go, and and it's like, more brilliant. And you go online, it's just like, oh my god, and it's just you're in awe of how smart people are, and so it's very easy to be intimidated, and the more you engage in this kind of stuff, the more inadequate you might feel. So it's hard to get people. And in the open source side, we've got this culture at Spree, but it took a while to get people just put this out there unfinished. And I think GitHub has really helped with this kind of pull request, here's an idea, and people just throw stuff up there and see if anybody comes by and is interested. So companies, organizations, whatever, they can really benefit from this risk-taking kind of thing and embracing failure. So at the hackathon we do, and we also say, hey, it's okay if it doesn't work, and that's learning too, right? So one of the projects was just a quote unquote failure, right? But it wasn't, because we spent a day completely ruling out a bunch of things that we shouldn't be doing. So
we were talking about this last night actually, and I had thought of something to the effect of, failing is okay, because learning what not to do is just as important as learning what to do. And so I never see a problem with failure in my mind.
Yeah, especially you can fail efficiently.
Right.
Yes.
Fail
you
fast.
can learn from the failure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how many times do we refactor our code? I mean, it's just so like you don't have to. So, and I liked it. I saw some stuff here, like the guy did a hackathon, or during the lightning talks, guy did time travel jam or whatever. He's like, this is a work in progress. It really hasn't been tested beyond this like 20-line Ruby program, but like, hey, just put it out there and see if anybody responds to it, right? Like, here's what I learned. It's, I don't know, in you never know. Maybe someone else will just take that idea and run with it, or I don't know. It's just like I like that about conferences, and I love seeing unfinished work, and just like I don't know what to do next. Kind of like I think it takes a lot of guts to present something like that.
Right.
Is there certain things you think that we as developers for the web and for the Internet of Things and mobile and all these upcoming things that are happening that are sort of paralleled to what we're doing now? Do you feel like that there should be some movement that we need to shift our focus with Ruby and web development in general? Because I mean, you guys work with other languages as well as Ruby,
right?
I'm sure. So different people come from different backgrounds, and so approaching that problem of, hey, the web is changing, things are changing in development in general. How do we pivot to, for lack of a better word, to adjust?
One of the things I think is I've been involved in engineering for a really long time at this point, and keeping an open mind, I think, is going to serve everybody a lot of good. I think in the Ruby community, we tend to get very elitist about the tools we use, the editor, the testing style, and we put the blinders on and sort of shun anything else that maybe is different from what we know. And especially when we talk about the web as it is today, it's no longer just a Rails application that is running your whole architecture. You can have so many things involved. You can have a completely client-side application that's using JavaScript frameworks, that's hitting cache data stores, that your database doesn't even get involved until at some point, maybe later in the day or the process. And so when you consider how the architectures are and the needs of your products, if you try to be too narrow-minded and there's only one true way to do development or one true way to use this technology stack, I think you're going to limit yourself in the solutions that you can create.
Yeah.
A trend, not a programming trend, but an important trend I think that I see happening and needs to happen is more representation from women and minorities in tech fields in general. There's a diversity of thought that's like missing, right? Just like if the same thing about one developer working on the code, versus 100, or in the case of Spree, like we have over 500 contributors now. It's so much better than, with 500 contributors and all those different viewpoints than it is for one. And, but you're still getting largely the, young male, oftentimes white in viewpoint, and oftentimes North American, right? Like in programming. So great ideas can come from anywhere, right? And there's talented, really smart people that are being underutilized or not even thinking about programming, but you're starting to see it shift, starting with outside the United States. Like you're seeing like a lot of the Rails core guys are all from like South America. We've got tons of people from Brazil.
Brazil
but there's
a huge community.
So I mean, but that used to be like, remote people or Brazil or third world. I mean, I think people still maybe have a dismissive idea, but that's like, there are some seriously good programmers that nobody has interacted with. It's like, and I mean, there are people in China, who use Spree, but they never ever post. They don't, whatever. But there are people out there with really great ideas that are untapped, and so we're starting to get there geographically. But but then there's the gender, issue that we have to overcome as an industry as well. But I think that's going to happen, in my lifetime. But there's work to be done there. That's an important thing that holds us back, right, from innovation, is like not having everybody at the table.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with the Rails Girls movement and how many people have come out to support that and be a part of that and help them coach and mentor all those young ladies, and that's been really exciting. I think that's a wave that's going to crest, I hope, very soon, and that way they can all start pouring into the workplace, right?
Yeah, it's starting to tip, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just talking with Yoko who spoke about JRuby and Java.
Yeah.
She said that she had started the Rails Girls over in Tokyo recently. I think it was. Don't quote. but yeah, it's just amazing the work that they've done. I wonder why. I mean, it's obviously different ways of thinking in different cultures, but I wonder why that is. Because I think with the internet, it's sort of drawn us all together. I wonder why that's still so prevalent. I would imagine it's a long journey, but you guys have thoughts on that?
Why? What's so prevalent?
So that's the white male contributor.
And computers in terms of, computers are expensive.
Right.
Yes.
And technology is expensive, right? So
And companies are looking for 4-year degrees.
If you look at who has all the resources, it's white males. I mean,
across all
globally.
cultures.
I mean, yeah. So, like, how much chance does a person in a slum in Mexico have of becoming a good coder? They don't, trying to just get by. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of gender stereotypes in terms of that discourage. There's a lot of obnoxious behavior and that goes on in the programming sort of environment, and it's gotten much better. But there's just people used to get drunk and go for drives, right? And then people were like, hey, this is not cool, this is a problem, right? And then it became uncool to get drunk and go driving, right? Just like it's going to be, it's already uncool to put up sexist slides and things. Like you get kind of shouted down, Right? If we did that here, somebody would probably boo us, right? It's gotten to the point now where you would get booed if you did that. So it's good. So it's just a cultural shift. It takes time. Programming is fun, and I think that's why I think there are a lot of male programmers who are interested in helping female programmers learn it, because it's fun. So why should the guys get to have all the fun?
Yeah.
So
I think it is changing. I think that as a society, we've recognized what's been happening and making a shift, and even women are feeling like they have these choices now and that they can do what they want. Right? They're being empowered, and they know that they're empowered now. And I do a lot of college recruiting. And I find that more than half the people at least half the people I talk to are women. It's not just men anymore, and it's a healthy mix of minorities. And so it's really exciting to know that these are the people who are coming into the industry next year, the year after, or the following year. So what we see now as a trend, I suspect is going to change very, very drastically in the next 5 to 10 years for sure. And that feels like a long time, but I think it is happening.
Yeah, I went to a science fair with my kid, and it was 50% girls there, 50% boys, or maybe 40% girls, 60% boys. But I mean, the kind of thing that 10, 15 years ago would be like, take your son to the science fair, and it's shifting. So I think that generation is going to be, as many women who want to program can.
Almost as if right on cue we're talking about
women in programming.
Yeah, Rails Girls and the shift.
Okay.
It was joined by Allison, who's also a speaker, so talk.
2 years ago, I helped start the Rails Girls DC, and I coached at the first one. And sort of my team that I worked with that day, most of them had never programmed before, let alone thought about how to make a web page display "Hello World." And the delight in their eyes when the first page showed up, it was amazing. And I remember that look on their face, because it's hard for me now that I have so much experience to kind of get that delight from programming. But they had that. And something that's been real rewarding is they've stuck with it. So that day they were just "Hello World," but now they tweet me and they're like, "Hey, I just got a job," or "I'm interning now," and and their successes. And it's been a couple of years and they're still sticking with it. And I've really carried that with me, and that's changed sort of my views and how the industry and what we can do and the power by opening up and trying to bring more people in.
So I was at that first Rails Girls. That's how I got started, and I didn't know. I'd never opened up terminal before. I had never used the command line, and just got the bug from that intro crash course day, and continued learning and continued pushing myself, and am now full-time developer. So yeah.
So you had an interesting topic today.
Yeah.
I didn't get to see it. I apologize. I'm a bad person.
He didn't see my talk either.
I haven't seen it. I saw Sarah's talk, and then I saw no one.
Busy.
So I probably shouldn't even say that I haven't seen them now.
Yeah, I know.
I've seen them all. They were fantastic.
Yeah, I watched them over and over.
Yeah, much better than cats.
So do you want to just since you just jumped in, I know it's oh wow, I'm catching the middle of a conversation. Can you just introduce yourself and what you spoke about today?
Yeah, my name is Allison Sharon McMillan, and today I spoke about reimagining what mentorship means. So the idea that the best mentorship relationships happen when both the mentor and mentee are both teaching and learning. And then effective strategies for mentors, effective strategies for mentees, and being able to use this idea of teaching and learning and switching in between the two when you're doing things like pair programming or code reviews, which are often the ways that we find most effective to improve our code.
Yeah, I haven't actually been to a Rails Girls event or anything, but I've done like training in schools like years ago, right? And it was really horrible. They would just get people in and out, and I see stuff like Hack Reactor and all these different models for teaching, like and the mentorship is a really big thing now. And I remember when I first did pair programming, I was really skeptical, and I was like, why would I ever do this? You're paying two people to do the same thing. But the amount of learning and context that you gain from doing that really was inspiring. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to do it at every job after that, which not everyone agreed with. But can you talk a little bit about that, and we'll kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I think that pairing, I think that there are a lot of talks out there about mentorship and like why you should mentor, why mentoring is great. I think that in those cases, I think sometimes mentees kind of get off the hook. But there are mentees also have to be really active, and they need to be setting goals, and they need to be good mentees as much as mentors need to be good mentors. And pair programming kind of takes the mentor-mentee relationship and places it in the context of code, and you're really switching back and forth. There's no clear line when you're pairing as to who's the mentor and who's the mentee. You're both roles because you keep switching back and forth between them. And I think that's why it's such an effective way to improve our code.
Yeah, and I think about the teaching methods that I did, and I realized that why I taught was so I could learn. So a lot of my students would teach me stuff. Mm-hmm. I'd watch how they do it, and I'd be like, wow, I didn't even think of that. Yeah. So it's pretty awesome to see it grow and blossom into something else.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an unexpected benefit of mentoring. Yeah. So when I encourage people to mentor, some people, they get their experience in the industry and then they think, well, then I got to it's going to be like a one-way relationship where they're just going to be dragging someone behind. It's going to take away from their daily work. Mm-hmm. But you end up realizing it's a benefit to you. You really learn a lot from I would say young person, but from your mentee that you would learn. They bring a lot of new insights. They change your perspective on things. And actually, as people who've been in the industry, programming 15 years, maybe like us, we didn't have the same resources that younger people have today. And they're coming in really sharp, and they really know their stuff. And I'm learning a lot. We have a couple of interns now at the company, and I have to kind of look things up, and it's hard to keep up with them. Yeah. And I'm surprised, but it's really rewarding when I can help them, and it's a two-way relationship.
Yeah, building on what Chris was saying, 15 years ago, there was a cost to information. Open source wasn't really a thing. Information was not free. It wasn't really even available on the internet. If you had some library and you wanted to know about it, you had to pay money for the manual or the book. And if you amassed information, you guarded it. You didn't want to teach people those things because it cost you so much to, monetarily and just mentally to learn these things and try and explore. So it's such an amazing time now that there's so many resources, and we're in this free hippie love era of programming where we want to teach everybody everything and everybody wants to pair. And that was a real challenge for me, I think 5 or 6 years ago, that there was that kind of shift. And I was like, no, this is my information. Yeah. This is how I got to the top. You can't have this. But then I realized that if I could teach people, it really turned into them, like you said, Eric, them teaching me, and that I started to learn more, and together we could grow. And so it's just been a change, and it's been exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I really enjoyed it. I don't get to do it that much anymore. I do occasionally get to do pair programming, but it's fun.
I find now that with the older folks especially, that it's more about what are your settings and what's your keystroke and what's your pattern here. And we don't even care about the code anymore. It's the optimization of that was 3 clicks, we can do it in 2, let's try this.
We have a unique approach for our interns and our mentoring at Custom Ink, and they actually become members of the team. They're not treated like people in a corner just working on little side projects. Mm-hmm. They're actually members of the team, and as soon as we can, maybe within a week, we get them to deploy to production code. And they become fully active members, and we're helping them. So I think that's something that maybe more companies should embrace, not just bring somebody on and have them work on side or research projects or things. They let them be part of the team.
Yeah, build something you're going to learn very quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think mentorship, when we were talking earlier about the gender imbalance, I think mentorship is a big part of it, right? Like, it's still, even though there were less resources when we were younger, or when I was younger, well, you guys are saying.
We are also old.
Yes.
Well,
you can't
the oldest
see us
person here is 29, right?
That's right. We're all 29.
Yes, back in 1990 when I was born. But look, there's that person who bought you a computer, right? There's all these subtle things you probably don't think about it's encouragement, right? Yeah. There's all these little things that you can do to encourage or discourage somebody from going into a field. And I think like when I was, coming of age, like women were not encouraged. They weren't given those even subtle like things to get into technology.
It wasn't a thought, right? It was like,
yeah, like it's just that. So that matters, right? So it's just some mentorship really plays. And if you think about like all those key kind of moments, like that teacher took an interest in you, etc. And it's easier. I know there's nothing sinister necessarily behind it. I think people relate to people who are like themselves. So I think men relate to men easier. So those fathers who have sons are like, maybe they are a little bit more inclined to mentor their kids or take their kid to work or do whatever, at least back then, than, for daughters, or take their kids to science fairs or things like this. So, just keep that in mind when you're mentoring people that, like you don't always have to, we try to broaden your horizons. You don't have to mentor somebody who's just like you, right? Like, they're like you, but they don't have to look or talk or come from the same kind of background as you. And the mentorship is just the encouragement. Like, you can do a lot with a little bit of encouragement. Like, hey, that was cool what you did, or whatever. Somebody who's well regarded, and they make a positive comment about something that you did well. I mean, they're not phony praise, but just a little. We can't say yada boy anymore either. I was saying to my wife the other day, so it's like a yada person or whatever, but a thumbs up, pat on the back kind of thing. That can be the difference, right? There's probably a teacher or somebody along the way that's really inspired you to keep going or with something, and you can be that for somebody else. So that's how,
it's a really good point,
over time, it makes a difference.
Forward thinking, how important do you think sorry, I'm going to flip the role here and be interviewer. How important do we think the coding kids kinds of programs are? Because it's not coding boys and it's not coding girls, it's coding kids, right? So any child is welcome to come in and try these things. I mean, is that going to have a positive impact on our environment now?
I mean, I think there's more just general awareness these days, right? So, like, Goldie Blocks has been, like, a huge success, and there's been a lot of news and information about them. And just, I think there's more awareness about toys and programs and who they're marketed to, and marketing them kind of towards everyone as opposed to specifically one gender or another. Right. So I think it'll be interesting how that changes throughout. I feel like I've read somewhere that there's a big difference between like mixed gender versus single gender classrooms, especially when you get into like middle school. And so oftentimes women thrive in classrooms that are only female because of some sort of adolescent ramen or whatever. And so I think it'll be interesting. Like, yes, there are a lot of coding programs now targeted towards all children as opposed to one gender or another. I am interested to see how that makes a difference throughout, like, past elementary school, when I think children start to be more aware of their gender and differences.
And self-segregate themselves just naturally,
Yeah, I don't know if we've, like, seen
more
the
of an
progression
identity
enough of
point,
that for enough time to see what sort of a difference it makes.
Right. I think it's at least going to open it up to the idea that technology is for everyone.
Absolutely.
And not just for boys and not just for girls.
Mm-hmm. And the barriers to everything have been lowered, so women who have made it through technology, now it's easier to find them, right? So before, when women were in new fields, like they just suffered and got through it and whatever, and all right, I was the one medical student out of 100, whatever. I still remember I had a doctor as a kid. I was looking at the picture on the wall and it was like 99 dudes and just her, but like, at that time, like, for whatever, she went to medical school in the 50s or whatever, like, who, if you wanted to aspire, if you're a woman who aspire to go to medical school, like, how do you find that person, right? But now that person can be on YouTube, that person can have their own podcast, that person, so women can reach other women that they want to mentor, like, and just, or design, so There's a company in the True Ventures portfolio, Little Bits. It's like electronics toy, but it's very. It was interesting because I was at a science fair and they had it's the snap circuits. All the boys like snapping, and then Little Bits equal boys and girls, maybe even a little more girls. And so there's like a difference. Like you could see it. Like the toys are just sitting there, and you can see who goes to which toy. And like, but that's a company where there's a woman CEO and a woman engineer. So you have people who are like tough enough to be like the first like woman electrical engineer in their class or whatever. And then now they're designing toys and programs and podcasts and curriculum that appeal to people like them. Yeah. So and the barriers are low. So I think that's going to erase a lot of the problems that we've had.
Thank you all for listening to the first episode of the Web Platform Podcast. Next week, we're going to have Pam Selly and Adi Chikara talk about prototyping. So that should be pretty interesting, pretty fun. If you want to reach us on the Twitters, it's at the Web Platform. And you can also get me. I'm Eric Isaacson, so that's E. Isaacson on Twitter. And if you have any ideas, definitely send them to either handle. Expect some more hosts to come on. Christian Smith will definitely be hosting a few. He's the creator of Anvil Connect server and several other open source projects. So you'll be able to catch him as well, and a few others. So we've got some great podcasts coming your way. And anything that you want to hear or talk about, definitely send it our way, and we'd be happy to look into it. We just really want to provide some great content for you guys out there. Some deep dive into some development coding, some hardware hacks, all sorts of stuff that we all want to learn more about and be a part of. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Bye. This episode comes to you at least in part through the support and sound equipment generously supplied by 3 Pillar Global. 3 Pillar is a software product development company in Fairfax, Virginia. And 3 Pillar is a leader in creating purposeful and innovative product experiences, and they were recently named to the Washington Post Top Workplace list of 2014. You can follow 3 Pillar on the Twitters at 3 Pillar Global. To find out more and see current job openings, please visit 3pillarglobal.com.